will have 9 seconds for each question, so you don't have to use all 90 seconds if you don't want to. But if you decide to, you'll have a 30-second. And then after the 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
This is also, we've got it live as well. And I guess right now I'll start introducing. Hopefully more people show up throughout. Y'all should tell some of y'all's friends to come by. This is going to be cool.
He worked so hard on this. He would really like us for him as well.
And we got cookies at the top.
Yeah, please grab a cookie at the top. There are 48 of them, and I don't know what to do if you don't grab them.
Also, at the very top, we have some index cards and some pens. If you've got any questions you want to ask anybody, you could just write them down a little bit, write down some questions. There's a little spot to put them. I'll be coming up periodically to take some down and bring them here for Julia to ask. But if you got any questions, don't be afraid to write it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what time is it.
It is 6:04.
Okay. So, Lily, should we start the?
I just started that.
Okay.
Just started that.
Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the format that this is going to follow, I'm Julia. I'm the co-president of College Dems, first of all, and I'm going to be moderating tonight. So the format this is going to follow is each candidate will have, I think it's, 2 minutes to introduce yourself, give an opening statement, and then after those 2 minutes, we'll get right into the questions. There's a specific format that they'll follow for answering. And yeah, you can have 90 seconds per answer. We also have a time person running down here. Thank you, Saren, to make sure that everybody has equal time to answer and that we don't keep you here for a million hours. So, but thank you all for being here. So, Ahmid, do you want to go ahead and get started with your starting statement?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ahmid Kargbo. I'm running to represent you in the House of Representatives for this district, for District 14. Why I'm running is because, as you guys see, I'm just a little bit older than you college students. I'm 25 years old. But while I'm usually working, past college, got little certifications in a program called Europe, and was working in corporate America. While I was meeting many people who had master's degrees, doctorates, and were making very high wages, they still couldn't do things like buy a home. They still couldn't do things like have a child and to travel the world and do the things that they really want to as young people. For me right now, seeing the evil in the world, seeing how our politicians don't care about any of us, seeing how they're cutting things like Medicare and Medicaid for our seniors, doing things like spending money on wars that we obviously don't want to go to, like Iran right now. I want to see leaders that represent us, that represent all generations, but are also going to look at young people because we are definitely not looked at. And I want to run on a platform of economic populism that stresses things like Medicare for all, free public college, and universal childcare, and things like a Green New Deal, things that are going to revolutionize and transform our economy into our 21st century and get away from the oil age. So I really just want to run on a platform of economic populism that's looking for everyone. So my name is Ahmid Kargbo, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is LaKesha Williams, and I'm also one of your candidates for North Carolina's 14th Congressional District. I am a business consultant, so I've had my business for 20 years. I'm also the proud mom of this young man who's here, who's around your age. And the reason that I'm running for Congress is because I'm concerned. Like many of you, I watch the news every day, and I almost don't recognize this country and what it has become. I'm concerned about my son's future. Will he be able to afford a house one day? Will he be able to get a job that pays him a livable wage so that he can live out his dreams? But then I'm also concerned about my parents. They're semi-retired, and I'm concerned about their ability to access their Social Security. Will they have healthcare benefits? And if my son doesn't have a future and my parents' financial situation is unstable, then it's going to fall on me to take care of both generations. And that's just not fair, because our tax dollars are being paid into a government that's using them to fund pet projects for a president who does not seem to care about working families. families. And so I want to go to Congress because the House of Representatives controls our federal budget. And I want to go and make sure that our tax dollars are being used to solve our problems, from healthcare to housing crisis to food security, all the things that are happening in our community that they've told us we don't have the money to fund. We see how they're spending money, that the money is there. It just has to be prioritized for working families. So again, I'm LaKesha Williams, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you all this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brent Caldwell, and I am an attorney and activist in Charlotte who's running in the 14th Congressional District. I am delighted to be here at Davidson at an event in college because, as I will get into, my time as a college Democrat was one of the most important periods of my life and set me on the path of activism that has led me to where I am today. When I first enrolled in college, the issues were the Iraq War and fighting for gay rights. My mother, Lieutenant Colonel Peggy Caldwell, had been called up to serve in the Iraq War, and that's when I first came to political consciousness, and I also got involved very heavily in fighting for gay rights. And in that work, I came to the conclusion that there was a strain in American society that had given up on democracy, and that they were doing everything they could to cement their economic privileges and to try to dominate over the rest of society with monopolies and economic concentrations and by suppressing the rights of workers. And so after college, I went and worked as a labor organizer. I worked on campaigns across the country, and eventually I settled here in North Carolina. Donald Trump represents that tendency almost to its fullest effect, and we see that activity in ICE across the streets. We see them continuing to cut taxes while also cutting benefits, and I'm running for Congress to take a stand against that and to set America on the path where I think will take it to its greatest potential for all of its citizens.
Awesome, thanks so much. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with the questions now. So our very first question, just to set the tone for the rest of this, is what puts you in the best position to beat Tim Moore? And we'll start right here.
Well, for me, what puts me in the best position? Well, I'm going to say is that to beat Tim Moore right now, for something that North Carolinians are desperately wanting for, somebody who is desperately going to fight for them with policies that are economically populist, things like Medicare for all, things like universal child care, things like abolishing ICE. You can go to many places that are even in rural counties, not just here in Mecklenburg County, in the city, and talk to people about messages like Medicare for all. That's very popular. And so, really, to beat someone like Tim Moore in this era right now, we're seeing plus 17 Republican districts flip to Democrat right now in special elections and stuff. So we're seeing movement towards the Democratic side anyways. But something I always talk about is FDR won every county in places like Mississippi and South Carolina are running on things like Social Security and the Federal Housing Administration, which is how most people buy their home today with the 30-year loan. If we have to run on big plans like Green New Deal, it's going to introduce things like high-speed rail to get away from the oil age and to connect our infrastructure and connect our rural areas. We need things to do things like nationalize Duke Energy, turn it into a public company instead of a company that owns 95% of our investor-owned utilities. That's something that all North Carolinians are clamoring for. It doesn't matter if you're left or right. Go talk to somebody about not turning Duke Energy into a public company. It's very popular. So I'm going to run on a campaign that's very popular. I'm going to be unabashed in things that people want to hear, that people want.
So when I was considering running for this position and looking at the district and knowing that it was gerrymandered, and a lot of people are saying, how do you represent a district that is so diverse from rural counties to suburban areas to urban areas? And I really started thinking about, what unites us. And from all the areas that I visited, everyone wants access to healthcare. Everyone wants to stabilize housing prices. Everyone wants to earn a living wage so that they're not dependent upon the government to provide for them, but they can go to the grocery store and buy their own groceries and pay their own mortgage. So for me, it's about going out into the community, talking to people, and helping people to see that we have more in common than divides us, and not running on a divisive message, but really helping the community to come together. Because I believe that if we can unify the 14th Congressional District, then that can show Congress how it's possible for us to lead and not to think about all the things that make us different, but all the issues that we have in common and how we can come up with solutions to solve those problems.
For better or for worse, I represent the professional organizer in this race. From my previous work in politics, I feel I have a very strong sense of how to run a successful campaign and how to organize on the ground. As I said, I've worked on 3 congressional races and I was a labor organizer. This capacity and the fact that it gives me the best chance to defeat Tim Moore has been recognized both by the AFL-CIO, who endorsed my campaign, and by the Charlotte Observer, who recently said that Caldwell's financial and organizational advantages give Democrats the best chance to win in the 14th district. Having good ideas is not going to win this election. You're going to have resources and have to have infrastructure in place to get that message out. There are 17,000 Democrats that voted in both 2020 and 2024 that haven't voted in the midterm since 2018. We're going to have to contact those people by knocking on the doors and calling them and having them come out. So far, I'm the only candidate who's put in significant time to raise money. I've raised $70,000, which isn't a tremendous amount for a congressional campaign, but it is many times over what my opponents have raised. I've talked to the DCCC, Matt Calderone, the Southern Regional Director, and they will not invest any money in North Carolina this cycle, so it's all on us. And so while we agree on many issues, I think the choice between the 3 of us comes down to who do you think is actually going to go out there and execute a plan that has a chance to defeat Tim Moore. And in this environment, this is our best possible chance to defeat Tim Moore that we will have in North Carolina for years and years.
Okay, thank you. All right, so kind of raised in some of your guys' answers, how would you address the cost of living crisis? And does the federal deficit at all concern you in doing so?
So the federal deficit is definitely a concern, but to address the cost of living crisis, one of the pieces of legislation that I would like to propose would be to ensure that corporations are not receiving tax breaks unless they're paying their taxes and they're paying their workers a living wage. I know that people think that corporations need tax breaks, but as a business consultant who works with business owners every day, I can tell you that what business owners really need are revenue. So by ensuring that corporations are paying their workers a living wage, that puts more money into the hands of working Americans, and then they get to do what? They go and buy the goods and services that those corporations are making, and it makes them less dependent upon government services, as well as putting tax dollars into local and state economies so that we can pay for infrastructure and pay for public education. So my strategy would be to change the tax code so that corporations are paying their fair share in taxes and paying their workers a living wage.
I strongly endorse the idea that LaKesha just laid out. I think we arrived at it independently. I've been talking about that for some time, but if your employees who work full-time do not earn enough or only earn so much that they still qualify for government benefits, your corporation should pay an additional tax, like Amazon, Walmart, and others who are having employees who couldn't work there but for the fact that they are getting healthcare and other services from the government. They shouldn't outsource these costs on us, particularly when they are the wealthiest corporations in the world. But that's just one good idea. There are many that are going to be needed to address the affordability crisis. I think any leader who wants to diagnose it or who wants to prescribe a solution to a problem, they also need to diagnose it. And I think that the diagnosis of how we've reached this situation is that there are intentional policy and institutional choices that have been put in place to suppress worker wages for the benefit of an elite, wealthy few who, through campaign finance, control workers. In the short term, we need to immediately raise wages by raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We also need to help make groceries cheaper. You may have seen my signs that say cheaper groceries, higher wages, stronger families. In the long term, we need to get the ways that these people control our policymakers. We need to reform those by getting money out of politics, by ending partisan gerrymandering, and by making it illegal to donate to a candidate who you also can't vote for.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously cost of living is a big problem for everybody. I do endorse the idea if you don't pay your workers a living wage, they have to get benefits, you definitely have to pay up for that, especially these rich corporations like places like Walmart that are some of the richest companies in the world. But to solve some of these problems for affordability, in the short term, I'll say things like for healthcare, like the ACA tax credit extensions, because people are suffering with the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. We need that immediately, but I always endorse switching to a universal healthcare system like Medicare for all, something that will ensure nobody has to die from healthcare, and also ensure that we are spending $5 trillion a year on healthcare just for that way to let people like United Healthcare to come in and price gouge us. Something also like universal public education, because that would obviously send our young people to college, obviously debt free, but also it would also put pressure on colleges like here for Davidson that are obviously price gouging students and charging rates of universities, private colleges far past the rate of inflation. It shouldn't be $90,000 to go to school. Doing things like nationalizing Duke Energy, like I said, everybody that I'm going to say that they have beef with Duke Energy, how much you're paying a month for them. And the idea of turning a monopoly that's regulated by North Carolina just into a public good instead would definitely help bring down the cost. Things like a Green New Deal, things like getting public transportation around, so we get from here to Charlotte within 20 minutes or within innovative ideas. We need innovative solutions that are going to help challenge corporate power and capital in this country.
Okay, thank you very much. So how, on a similar note, how will you protect Social Security and Medicare long term?
I think there was a question earlier about whether I think the deficit is a serious issue. I have not been too worried about the deficit earlier in life, but at this point, it is a very serious issue. It was reported just in the last couple of weeks that due to the Trump tax cuts, within 10 years, the deficit will be $62 trillion. Progressives like us have a much harder task than do conservatives because we actually want to do things. We don't want to just tear things down. We want to build programs that help people's lives. Some of the greatest accomplishments of the Democratic Party are Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. Social Security has cut senior poverty in half, and now it is under threat, in part because of mismanagement, but in part because of natural population growth. The solution there is that we should eliminate the cap on wages that are subject to the Social Security tax. Right now, only the first $184,000 in income is taxed through Social Security. If you eliminate the cap, then for the most part, the deficit we're seeing in the next 75 years will be addressed. On Medicare and Medicaid, two vitally important programs. One, we need a public option that could include a Medicare buy-in to get young, healthy people like me paying in premiums. I go to the doctor once every other year or so, and so I would probably be a net contributor. But we also need a public option there to show that insurance is possible without a profit motive, and I think that would grow to be our primary form of healthcare, and that would allow us tremendous negotiating power to negotiate down from providers, and that would also contribute to the sustainability of Medicare and Medicaid over the long term.
Yeah, while obviously I would love to remove the cap on Social Security, the wages past $180,000. Tax the rich 100% is something we have to do. The 1% right now holds $50 trillion in wealth, and that's absurd. That's more than the debt. The debt is $38 trillion. They definitely can't just keep hoarding and keeping money from us and then cutting benefits from our seniors and people who need it the most. So definitely starting with the rich, but also our infrastructure is something I always talk about because like here in North Mecklenburg, they always say a study has shown that we spend $1.15 for every dollar collected in taxes. Meaning we're losing money on the majority of our infrastructure here in North Mecklenburg. But when you scale that up to the entire United States, a study from the London School of Economics was showing that we're spending $1 trillion on our infrastructure roads to subsidize suburbia specifically. So we're gonna have to change how we spend and stop losing money because that was money, $1 trillion a year would be great for something like Social Security. We spend like $1.4 trillion on Social Security a year. So definitely changing how we spend our money and on infrastructure, taxing billionaires, and cutting out waste things like switching to Medicare for all instead of letting these companies price gouge since we spend the most money on healthcare in the world to not insure everybody. So I'm moving away from companies that price gouge us and then cost more to the American, not spending money on useless wars. These are ways that we can help protect our seniors.
So I would say in addition to removing the cap on those who pay into Social Security, we also have to get away from the notion that Social Security is an entitlement. It is actually something that people have paid their entire working lives into, and so it is a benefit. And so we cannot make generations feel guilty about taking advantage of something that they paid for. I think that it's also a reason that we need to stabilize healthcare costs, because for those of you who don't know, people who receive Social Security and they also receive healthcare benefits, their healthcare benefits come out of their Social Security. So the higher the cost of Social Security, the less dollars that they're receiving. And there are some seniors in our communities who the only source of income that they have is their Social Security check every month. And so as those healthcare costs continue to rise, that's less dollars that they're getting to buy groceries and to pay for household expenses. So we need to definitely ensure that there is money in the Social Security fund, making sure that we're investing those dollars wisely, not privatizing Social Security, and making sure that we're controlling healthcare costs so that people are getting more money into their household.
Are we doing rebuttals?
You may have a 30-second rebuttal.
So obviously no one addressed me specifically, so I'm not rebutting anything to them, but I wanted to emphasize that this is the most important point in this election. The social safety net is what, and the fact that Americans have a right to it, and that there is something such as a commonwealth that you get solely by being an American citizen, that is part of the greatness of our nation, is what sets the Democratic Party apart from the conservative movement. And as AI grows and there's less need for regular work, we're going to have to continue to expand the social safety net as we focus on human needs and not the interest of capital.
Okay, we're going to pivot a little bit to our next question. What should the future of immigration enforcement look like?
I think I took that one first time.
Yeah, so immigration enforcement the future should look humane. It should not be masked men in the street with assault rifles shooting civilians and not following the law. When they enter private property and they're wearing masks and people are saying you can't be here, and they're saying get that out of your head. You need to stop talking about the Constitution or whatever. So I mean, we have to completely, in my opinion, we have to reform, abolish ICE, not just reform it, because it's something that they always talk about. These agencies were made in 2002. They were made in the reorganization of the Department of Homeland Security, the creation of that agency. Before that, from 1789 to 2003, the United States Customs Service held the powers and functions that ICE and DHS held today, and so did the Immigration and Naturalization Service that existed from the 30s until 9/11. After 9/11 happened, you see George Bush with the Patriot Act and with the Iraq War, Afghanistan, and all these power grabs to really militarize these agencies and really use it for war. So these agencies were made in the image of the War of Terror, and since 2002, they need to be completely abolished and reformed in the image of humane immigration reform. Nobody wants violent criminals in the country. Nobody wants violent foreign criminals in the country. Everybody wants our country secure with safe borders, but we definitely don't want masked men and masked dogs running around, especially an agency that's younger than me going around and doing this. We definitely need to reform them and have a completely different agency and then disperse their functions around, because something like TSA and FEMA should not be a part of the DHS.
So I would say for me, immigration looks like creating pathways for citizenship. As we've seen with ICE, a lot of times they're going into courthouses where people are trying to go and get their citizenship. They've, cut out some of the naturalization ceremonies. There are people who are trying to become citizens the right way, but they just have a really difficult time. I was talking to a gentleman here in Davidson who said his wife was an immigrant, and they had to have several blood tests, like here and in her home country, in order for her to get citizenship. And I couldn't understand, why do you need to have blood tests to become a citizen? So I think that a lot of us are unaware of some of the obstacles that people are having to go through to become citizens. And we need to make sure that we're creating an unbiased program that allows people who want to come here and become citizens to do so without concern for what their origin country is.
Sometimes with nations, as with people, when you have a significant problem, you have to hit rock bottom before you realize that you really need to change. Hopefully, this past year is America's rock bottom with respect to immigration with the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. I think there are many Americans who are repelled by this, and hopefully we can turn this into a moment where we have a grand bargain. In the last 25 years, there has been a major wave of immigration of people from Latin American countries, and I personally have no problem with it. When we last saw something like this from 1890 to 1920, it brought in many people who dramatically improved and enriched our nation from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe and also other parts of Europe, and we're better for it, and I think we'll be better for this. These Latin American immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than native-born Americans. They're hardworking, and they are just they're the ones who had some get up and go to come here to try to build a better life. But this is an issue of a rule of law, and the idea that there is no border does not sit well with even compassionate and kind-hearted people. And so we need a grand bargain that gets it past the citizenship for DACA recipients, for people here on temporary protected status, for people who've been here for decades without causing problems. And I think another part of that will be limiting who can apply for asylum and speeding up the process through which these people are considered by hiring a large number of immigration judges to quickly hear these cases and to return people in this country who do not have a legal basis for staying here.
Thank you all. If Democratic leadership takes a position that you believe will hurt your district if elected, how would you respond?
I think that's easy. I wouldn't support the legislation. I don't believe that as a Democrat I should support every Democratic piece of legislation, and I also don't believe that I should oppose every Republican piece of legislation. I think that legislation should be judged on whether or not it helps working families in my congressional district. And I think one important thing that as Congresspersons you have to do is to make sure that you're educating your constituents so that you understand why we're taking votes on certain bills and what's in the bill, because a lot of times what you see on the news, the issue is much deeper than that. I mean, you have a bill that's hundreds of pages. There might be something that's buried in there that will cause me from just taking my personal conscience and say, I can't support this, and I need to be able to communicate that with you and let you know why I am or I'm not supporting something. But it shouldn't be based on which political party puts forth the legislation, but it should be based on whether or not it's going to help working families.
If there is a position in which I disagree with Democratic leadership and I've been elected into this district, I will be overjoyed, because winning this election this year will be quite an accomplishment. Holding on to it will be a whole other ballgame. And whoever wins the seat, if it's a Democrat, they need to establish themselves as their own woman or man, because it's still a red-leaning district. There's a woman named Representative Glusenkamp Perez who does a great job of this in Washington State of still being a principled progressive who her constituents know she marches to the beat of her own drum. I am a yellow dog Democrat, which is an old Southern term for I love the party and I stick with it. I mostly vote straight ticket. My progressive blog is called yellowdogwire.com if you want to check it out because of that old title. But I do not think the Democratic Party has all the answers, and I have many policies that they will not be happy with. For example, saying that you can't donate to a candidate you can't vote for is a radical change that will dramatically upset the donor class that's very central to both political parties. I also, and I loudly say regularly, that we need more than two political parties in this country. The Democratic Socialists should have the ability to be their own party. And on the right wing, there should be a Libertarian Party, there should be a MAGA Party, there should be a Christian Conservative Party. And that's why we need ranked choice voting, so that we can have minority parties in this country that can put pressure on the two major parties and bring up ideas that Americans need to hear.
So yeah, obviously as a young person, many of us definitely don't agree with the Democrats in a lot of decisions. So it's going to be very easy for me to, not, if they do something that I don't like, to not jump on, because I'm not going to be a party loyalist. I don't have any super brand loyalty to these guys, besides the fact that Republicans are acting really fascist right now. So. But yeah, so I won't ever hesitate to look out for my district, to look out for my people, especially with all these bills that like to hide in a lot of fine text, a lot of fine details in there that might affect your life in a horrible way. But I guess it's a push back on something as well, though. Like Marie Glusenkamp Perez is she's not a progressive at all. Not say she's a progressive. She's one of the people who voted to open up the border to open up the government whenever we're shutting down over the funding dispute in December, and then she's also one of the people who voted to fund ICE just a couple last month when we were having the fight about the budget as well. And her constituents were obviously hating her for it, clowning her for it, because like, what are you doing? What is this compromise? What is this bipartisan fetish? So it's like I definitely don't see that as a model and would never use that as a person I'd want to emulate when I get into Congress, because yeah, especially for young progressives, definitely see her as like a betrayal who's just co-opting the language of progressivism, and then when you have the actual chance to be a progressive, to do progressive things, you don't do it. You betray your constituents and people, especially on very popular ideas. So, yeah.
With the second person answer his question, she is candidate. Another time,
Yeah.
okay, just asking one question. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna do another question now. Thank you all for your answers. What do you believe is the best way to move forward with the Epstein files? How would you protect and bring justice to the victims if elected? And what does realistic accountability look like?
I think it's fine. This is a wonderful opportunity for the Democrats, and we should press it for all it's worth. I actually reached out last week to Kate Barr to see if she would sign on to a joint statement calling for the resignation of Howard Lutnick for lying about his relationship to Epstein. I was going to get Kate on board and then come to my other opponents so that we could say that every person in this race but Tim Moore, who surely would not go against Tim Moore, go against President Trump and his cabinet, is trying to hold the Epstein class accountable. Kate Barr declined to do that, and so that did not get out of the gate. But, this was supposedly the right-wing issue through QAnon and Pizzagate, this idea that there are, elite networks of pedophiles around the world, and now it's blown up in their face. And this is just the kind of thing that we need to be talking about, because there are people who this is very important to them, who may never vote for a Democrat, but they could become so disgusted with Tim Moore that they fail to show up this fall. And to win this election, we're both going to have to bring down Tim Moore and build up ourselves. And so Democrats should be talking about the Epstein class at every opportunity to sully their opponents, while also talking about our positive ideas to draw the contrast, so that when people think of Republicans, they think slimy, and when they think of Democrats, they think of hopeful and substantive.
So, obviously, if you haven't been living under a rock, you've probably seen some of these Epstein files, and they're pretty crazy. Seeing the elites of the world who run our country, like the highest, the cream of the crop when it comes to having power. They're in a pedophilia ring internationally as well. Seeing people like Howard Lutnick, seeing people like obviously all of our billionaires, like the Peter Thiels, the Elon Musk, the Bill Gates. Seeing it in the UK, people like Peter Mandelson, and seeing all the consequences how it's having across in other countries, like in Norway, all these places. But in the US, it seems not to have any real consequences on our leaders. Someone like Tim Moore was saying that he didn't agree with Thomas Massie what he was doing with the discharge petition, because he was just doing it the wrong way. But all Tim Moore is trying to do is protect pedophiles. We definitely have to attack Tim Moore and attack the Republicans on this, because quite literally they hid these files. I mean, they do have the argument and say that, yes, Merrick Garland hid the files, which they definitely did. I don't know why Joe Biden would have signed this for years. But right now, the public is putting pressure on it. Trump ran on it, and they're hiding it. We're seeing multiple times now, people are now going on the House floor and saying that people like Trump were in the files talking about abusing minors and talking about all these other connected individuals. And then the FBI is saying they don't want to prosecute. So the FBI needs to be abolished as well, because what are these guys doing? They're actually ridiculous. So we definitely have to push this towards them, because this is insane that at the highest level of government we're allowing this to happen.
Yeah, so I think the next Congress is going to need the ability to walk and chew gum. Not only do we have an affordability crisis with healthcare, housing, food insecurity, but we also have an accountability crisis in this country. And so there are going to be tons of hearings with Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi. We're going to have to investigate, what has been happening, and we are going to have to uncover what is in the Epstein files. And I have a feeling that there are a lot of national security risks that we're going to uncover, because Epstein was not only trading young women, but he was also trading secrets. And I think that that's one of the reasons, in addition to trying to protect Trump, that they've been hiding a lot of what's in those files. And so we're going to have to do the hard work of uncovering what has happened and bringing it to the people and doing it in a way that, you know, protects the secrets that have been shared across this world, but also holding those who have abused young women accountable for their crimes. So I think it's going to be a tall task, but it's something that's definitely necessary.
Thank you. For our next question, do you believe that American democracy is under threat? And if so, how would you work to protect it?
Yes. First of all, ICE and DHS, like I said, completely reorganize their powers to these people, because right now Trump's talking about things like, we'll just Steve Bannon, of course, saying, the former chief strategist of the White House, saying things like, we're not going to let you guys steal an election again. We're going to have mass men outside the polls. And we're obviously seeing how they're deploying into blue cities that don't have high population of immigrants, because they're trying to obviously scare us right now. We can't keep allowing these people to keep bullying us right now. First of all, how they get to these elections in the first place is through money in politics, which is the problem in the first place, showing our democracy is objectively under attack, because how they get there is by with dark money, with super PACs, with all these villagers donating to them, because it's hard to win any races without money. And then once they use that, and then once they have that power, now they're using they're threatening things like using the military, using secret police against us. We have to do things like obviously get rid of ICE and DHS, but things like the Montana plan, which would do things like codify the ability to strip corporations' powers to spend in elections, which would definitely take away from a lot of these artificial entities interfering with our elections and getting in the way of human beings. Democracy is definitely under attack, and there's too many things that we need to do to address it, but those two things are very big: getting money out of our politics and obviously the secret police that are right in front of our faces.
So I definitely think democracy is under attack. And if you're on Threads, I don't know if you see, but the Constitution actually has a Threads account, and it's constantly humiliating people who do not understand how our government works. And when I moved to Charlotte in 2016 as a regional organizer for Hillary's campaign, and going out, knocking on doors, and trying to get people engaged in the process, it really helped me to see just how much people do not understand about our government. And it's been further solidified running in this election, because a lot of people think that Congress has the power to do things that their county commissioners might be in charge of, their city council. And so I think one of the reasons that democracy is under threat is because people don't realize how fragile democracy is. And by not voting and not being civically engaged, you're giving away that power. And that's what ushers in authoritarianism. So I think that's why we have to continue having forums, and we have to continue talking to people and educating them about the power that they have, because this government belongs to us. It doesn't belong to the elected officials. It doesn't belong to the people who have money. It belongs to the citizens who vote. And we have to make sure that people understand that they have the power to control what happens at every level of government.
Y'all are here for a forum and not a lecture, but I'll give you a short one. My diagnosis of what's going on right now is that in 1932, FDR and a form of progressivism became dominant in America, and it really governed the country. Democrats controlled Congress in all but one, in the House of Representatives, in all but one term until 1994. And the paradigm was that there was an agreement between corporations, the people, and government to have capital, basically a social democracy with capitalism and a welfare state, to take off the rough edges of capitalism. Conservatives, starting with Buckley, and then later in the 1970s with Lewis Powell, the Powell Memorandum, mounted a challenge, and they said, we don't have the people, but we have money and we have business. And in Reagan, in the early 90s, they felt there actually was a chance to win us over with democracy, but when they started talking about their actual goals, the people weren't on board. And so now they see that that's not going to happen. And they felt under Obama that they were falling behind. They got another large government social spending program, the Affordable Care Act. And so in their minds, they have crossed the Rubicon, and they've given up on the idea that they're going to win over the people. And instead, they are trying to force in their policies. And they are expanding the window of what's possible to get us used to the idea that we are no longer sovereign, with people like Curtis Yarvin, with Steve Bannon saying Trump's coming in for a third term. Because if they have the opportunity, they will bring about the end of the republic. So the attack is happening. The battle's met. The moment is now, and the only way out is for us to take a stand and fight against it.
Thank you. Are you placing any self-imposed restrictions on who you'll take donations from? And if so, will you still have enough capital to effectively campaign?
Yeah, definitely wouldn't take any money from like any big super PACs, any big corporations, anything like all the. Somebody actually called me. Actually, he said he was like, "I'm about to file an absentee ballot for you. I like your platform and everything." He was in the military, saying just about to do it really quick, but he was just saying, "Will you take any money from APAC?" And I was like, "Of course not. Why would I ever, do anything like, especially running as a young candidate that says they're progressive." So, if you're gonna say you're progressive and you want to run on a progressive platform, whatever, you definitely shouldn't be taking the money from shady individuals that do everything at the end of the day to try to stifle your movement from happening. That work on the other side to bring in values that we don't agree with. So definitely won't be taking money from any big super PAC corporations, and definitely not anything like APAC.
So for me, I think that, when we talk about getting money out of politics, we have to consider, so what's the alternative? And for me, the alternative is building a people-powered movement, which is what I've been doing. So I haven't raised a lot of money for my campaign, but what I have done is built a lot of relationships. And it's very heartening when I go into spaces and people have told other people about me, and they're excited to finally meet me because they've heard that I'm someone who represents their interests and who's willing to listen to them and get to know them. So I'm not concerned about who's donating. Well, I am concerned about who's donating to my campaign, and I'm not planning to take money from organizations that do not reflect my interests. But I'm not as concerned about raising money for my campaign, because I know that to be successful requires being present in your community. I don't know if you all are familiar with Representative Alma Adams. She is hard to beat. No matter who runs against her in her district, it is hard to beat her. And it's not because she has a bunch of money, but it's because she's active in the community and people know her, they trust her, and they support her. And that's the type of candidate and congresswoman that I'll be, someone that everyone knows and they trust me and they want to support me.
So the truth is, the fundamental premise of this question doesn't apply to most of our, or to anybody sitting here, because large corporations are not going to donate to any of our campaigns. When I worked on campaigns, I was a fundraiser, and I know that most political action committees by a corporation have a policy of not donating against incumbents, or if they do, they wait until the last month or two, and that incumbent has to seriously be at risk, and the challenger must be clear that they're going to win, and they get on board at the last minute. I would reject money that I thought was coming from a disreputable source, such as APAC or like a large pro-gun organization or something like that. But they're not going to support me because my ideas are a direct threat to the way they do business. These organizations, they make some direct contributions, but their real strength is they have national fundraising lists that they use, and they say, these are our targets, and you should flood money into these districts. My proposal to make it illegal to donate to a candidate you can't vote for is directly targeted at defeating those kind of interest networks. But we do have to raise money in this campaign. To win this election, we're going to have to flip 35,000 votes. And that's not going to happen by word of mouth. It's going to happen through paid communication and through efforts on the ground. And even a field team is going to require support with printing, support with phones, and things of that nature. So my campaign, I think, we can run a okay campaign with 300,000, but we really need to get to 450,000 to defeat Tim Moore.
Okay, thank you. If elected, you will have a Republican president, potentially a Republican Senate, and maybe even still a Republican House. Given that, how will you effectively legislate?
So I think it goes back to my earlier point, is looking for good legislation. I think that when we look across this district, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, from healthcare to housing to farming, there are Republicans who have districts that are also facing those same issues. And so you do have to find a way that you can build consensus that will help your constituents without just looking at party lines, but really thinking about how do we find solutions to the problems that our constituents are facing. So I would work to find those solutions rather than focusing on who's bringing the solutions to the table.
I think many individual elected officials underestimate the power of their voice. Americans still respect and appreciate hearing real and unique ideas that are targeted at the problems they face in their daily lives. My campaign is going to be a campaign of ideas. And one thing that we will be doing if I make it to the general, because this is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, we're going to harken back to how they had political discussion then, which was through pamphlets like Letter from Pennsylvania Farmer and Common Sense. And so starting in late March, going through September, each month we will have a new pamphlet that looks at America's highest ideals and applies them to the problems we have today and shows why progressive ideas are more in line with our highest values. And we are going to spread that to the district at country restaurants, gas station checkouts, hand to hand. We'll leave them underneath people's windshield wipers and cars, and they'll get some real substance. And if elected, that should continue because rather than falling in line, I think more people need to speak up and give an authentic voice, and that will resonate. When people take the time to do that and say something worth really listening to, they'll get followers and people will start listening to what they're laying out.
So yeah, definitely, I would love for us to have the House, see we clean the House. Potentially the Senate might be in play. That's that's hopeful, but it's a lower chance. But the House should definitely come back. Even if we don't get the House, one thing I look at right now is that Washington is that they're not really effectively governing right now. Anyways, we just saw the longest government shutdown, 2 months ago, and so really. I just want to be the voice to advocate what my district wants, what my constituents want, what you guys want. So when I'm going there on the floor to speak, I want to really push forward the idea, really fight for you guys for things like a universal healthcare system, things like free public childcare and education. So really, it's going to be going up there and really fighting for you guys, really. Promoting these ideals, because the one thing that we have that's bad in Congress in the first place is that these politicians aren't even pushing these ideals in the first place. They're pushing corporate agendas first. They're pushing what their donors are saying. They're not even going in and trying to push the ideas that will move us forward, like a Green New Deal. Only very few politicians. So definitely, Congress isn't legislating effectively right now. So obviously, if we don't get something like the House, and one of us were to get elected, it would be like a deadlock again with Republican ideologies, especially with things like the filibuster and the Senate. But even with that, you can still. Today isn't going to be the only day. There's still going to be 10 years, 20 years. You're going to fight for your constituents and the ideas that they're going to want in the future, and so you can get that. So you can get that legislation passed through with the will through your voters.
All right, before we jump into our next question, I'd like to invite the audience to start writing questions. So we've got some note cards up at the top. Dylan could walk around really quick. He'll give you a pen, he'll give you a note card. Fill it out with a question if you'd like to directly ask our panel. And let's see, we have 2 more questions, or 1 more question after this. After that question, we will collect the note cards, and then we will answer some of those questions. Okay, so moving on to our question. Our next question is, how would you represent constituents who didn't vote for you? And where do you see potential areas for bipartisanship or agreement?
I see 2 aspects to that question. One is constituent services, which Tim Moore is currently doing terribly on. I was contacted 2 weeks ago because someone's trying to get what's called a DD-214 for a homeless veteran. They've called Tim Moore's office 3 times and sent 2 emails and gotten no response. So I'm trying to see what I can do, even just as a candidate, to help this gentleman out. Every resident of the district deserves strong constituent services. It's just part of the job. Whether I agree with them or not, it is my duty to help them make the most of the government benefits and programs that are available to them, and to treat them impartially and fairly, no matter their political beliefs. But as far as matters of principle and matters of policy, I believe that you shouldn't compromise and you shouldn't try to go halfway just to appease people. Democratic Party has tried this in the last 30 years, and it's clearly gone terribly. Bill Clinton was the triangulator, third way, and they impeached him for hypocritical reasons. and tried to disgrace him in the books of history and accused him of murdering his aide, Vince Foster. Obama said, there's no red America, there's no blue America, there's the United States of America. And they immediately met and said, we're not going to do anything to help him. They accused him of palling around with terrorists. And so there's no point in going halfway for someone who's only going to use that as a sign of weakness to go further to the right. Our ideas are better. They are more reasonable. They are better for the American people. And people in the middle who truly are swing voters will respect us if we stand and fight for them more than if we try to compromise just for the sake of compromise.
So there's going to be about, right now in this country, like about 30% of people that are going to be diehard Trump supporters. No matter what happens, they're going to ride or die for him. Like it's going to be, there's nothing I can really do to change your mind potentially on that. But there's more swing voters ever today, and there's more independents than ever. But even for those people who aren't going to vote for me, you know, I still want to look out for them with populist message. So I agree with what Brent said. We should go to try to appease them, go to the center, because we've seen people try to do that before and it backfires in our face. So I really want unpopular ideas. I want to run something like Medicare for all. You talk to somebody in the county, you talk a lot about universal health care. A lot of them are really for it. They're like, yeah, I love the idea. I know I hate how much I pay in health care. I hate seeing people die that I know, people who can't afford their bills. So really running on that populist message that's going to get them out, because realistically speaking, if you talk to a lot of people on the right, I've talked to a lot of conservatives out in these areas, and I was talking to a lady, we were disagreeing on something, disagreeing, but she said to me, I don't think anybody should make over $100 million. You know, she was saying, I don't think, and I wouldn't even say something like that, you know, tax some people out $100 million, but you know, if there was like a bill, obviously I wouldn't mind signing on, but it's like, that's, you know, that was a lady who was very conservative, but she had that idea, and that's a very almost left-leaning idea. There's a lot of ways you can compromise with people on very popular ideas, things like free public education, things like universal child care, things like changing our immigration system. So, I mean, right now, if you really appeal, if you not necessarily appeal to them, just appeal to what's popular, what we all want, that can help come around to people who don't vote for you, you think that you're just a crazy leftist.
So I'll say for the past 20 years, my consulting firm has specialized in solving problems. People have problems and they pay me to give them solutions. And when people have problems, their problems aren't Democratic problems, they're not Republican problems. People just want solutions. And so I would lead in the congressional district, not worrying about whether someone who comes to me with a concern is a Democrat or Republican, but do you have a problem and how can we solve it? And I think that that's the approach that our entire government needs to take, and stop having such partisan positions, but really getting back to solving American problems. How do we make sure that every family can pay their rent or their mortgage, every family has access to health care, and every family can put groceries on their tables? And when we keep the main thing, then I think people will respect that and they will come over to the Democratic Party.
Okay. I believe this is an audience member question. It's similar. Who are your political role models who have succeeded in winning over conservative voters?
Well, there's actually a video that I really love by More Perfect Union. It shows Bernie Sanders went to West Virginia. That video has like 10 million views now. It's in a very rural district, and people were like, you know, just spreading his message, just talking to them, and people were very intrigued, very interested. Something that doesn't really go talk about much is how like Bernie Sanders won every single county versus Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and was winning rural areas. In fact, he won Polk County, where we live here, back in 2020, in the 2020 general election. So really, so like people like Zoran, for example, like that I really love in New York right now, he got 10% of MAGA voters. And people are talking about that's a switch, and it's something that Trump said when they were in the Oval Office. Like, a lot of people who look like me voted for you. So really, these are people who I'm saying, like I keep saying, running on a populist message. You're running on unabashed populism, and they're building a movement behind this. They're building a party that, for the future, that's going to help. That's going to look like more like us and our ideologies. So I'll definitely say those two because they definitely have success moving over right-leaning voters, especially Zorn as of late, he's a great example of getting 10% of black voters, which is pretty crazy to do as someone who is running as a leftist, especially the antithesis of Donald Trump's plans.
So I have an undergraduate degree in political science from Vanderbilt, and my first job out of college was managing a campaign for a gentleman who was running for the Tennessee General Assembly. And of course, he didn't take my advice, and he lost. But when he ran again, he did take my advice to get more involved in the community, and he ended up winning. And if you know anything about what's happening in Tennessee right now, you know that their General Assembly is very polarized. But he's been serving for over a decade, and he's been able to pass some really good legislation by building consensus when possible, but also standing up when necessary. And so he and I talk all the time about, like, how do you do it? How do you go into rooms with people who you know have evil intentions, because some of the legislation that they propose is just evil, but he's still able to work within the party as well as work across the aisle for the betterment of his community. So his name is Representative Harold Love Jr., and he's the person that I admire, not just because I helped him get elected, but because I really admire the way he legislates.
There are two who I would highlight, both who happen to be most prominent in the 1960s. The first is Terry Sanford, who was one of North Carolina's most successful governors in history. And he was able to bridge the divide between progressives and the rural, more conservative parts of the state by focusing on kitchen table issues and showing that his policies would deliver prosperity for all. He led the tremendous investment in public education and our educational institutions in the state that have given North Carolina the reputation it has. The other who, I always hesitate to say admire, because he did such a terrible job in foreign policy, but someone who I think is worthy of study by all Democrats and progressives is Lyndon Johnson. Bill Moyer said that Lyndon Johnson was 12 of the most interesting men he ever met. And it's so true. You always got a different Lyndon Johnson depending on what he thought would most advance his cause. And he was seen as conservative, he was seen as unprincipled, but the reality is Lyndon Johnson passed more progressive legislation than any other politician in history by focusing on building power and actually bringing about results. We got the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the War on Poverty. And so he is someone who I look to for lessons on focusing on the end goal and actually bringing about results.
Awesome, thank you guys. We have one more audience question, I believe, and then we'll do a final question. So similarly, this person from the audience asks, how specifically would you engage with constituents? Town halls, individual meetings, etc.
Yeah, obviously, like I said before, Tim Moore doesn't even host one town hall, so I'm hosting infinite more by the time if I were to get elected, just by hosting one. I would love to do things like have, like even if it can't be there in person, obviously live streaming, hosting events at, any brewery, or just get together with the community, talk about what you guys want. Would love to obviously hear what's on my community's mind. What does my community want? I'd love to put updates of what's happening in Washington, what I would vote on, what I want to pursue for the future. So definitely, I want to keep you guys engaged. One reason why everybody hates Tim Moore right now is because the guy doesn't talk to anybody, but sends a few of his constituents. We just want to talk to maybe our representative. Maybe he'll show any care, and then he does evil things like cutting the social safety net. So yeah, if I was going to do something like cut the social safety net, at least I'd have the spine to look you guys in the eyes before I did it. So definitely want to look out for you guys and talk to you guys as much as possible, whether in person, whether virtually, and then keep you updated on what I'd be doing.
So I think most people are really busy living their lives, and by chance, when you all have a chance to come to a meeting, the last thing that you want to think about is, how do I go and share this information with my congressperson? So one strategy that I would implement if elected is to have a community liaison who attends your meetings and is a part of your group, and so then they can confer back with me about what are you talking about and what are you concerned about, but then also to share what am I working on in DC, so that when you see me, it's not like drinking drinking from a fire hose, trying to share everything that's happened since the last time you saw me. But having someone who is attending the Young Democrats meeting, the Senior Dems meetings, the Polk County Dems meeting. Like, there's so many meetings that are happening and so many conflicting interests that it can be difficult for people to feel like their voice is being heard. So rather than you seeking out your congressperson, I think that your congressperson should have a representative that's coming to you. And then when in town, like, I would love to come to your meetings and hear directly from you and allow you to share with me. So that's how I would keep the community engaged.
Rightly or wrongly, I genuinely believe that we are in a situation where there are many policies that are supported by the vast majority of Americans that are being held back by a small few who would either have to pay for them or whose privileges would be eroded by them. And that is a philosophy that's formed the basis of my campaign, which is very people-centered. I would say extraordinarily accessible in this campaign. I hand out a card with a number that routes directly to my cell phone. We are regularly hosting meet and greets. Actually, just before I came in, I approved advertising for the meet and greet we're having in Gastonia on Saturday. We had one in Pineville on this past Sunday. After a forum that we all three were at in Shelby, North Carolina, I had one with 36 people in Shelby, North Carolina on Saturday night, and I had two in the week before that, and I also had two in the weekend before that. And sometimes it's only a handful of people in a room, but I'm trying to be accessible, to truly organize and to activate rather than the regular people who, as you guys know, in Democratic groups, there's a small group that seems to do most of the work. I'm trying to get the people who may have never been involved in politics before, but who realize they need to take a stand now. And this, trying to stay close to the community and bring out opinions that you don't normally hear, is something that I would continue if elected, because I think that is the way to continue to hold the seat for Democrats and to stay in touch with your constituents so that you can truly represent their interests.
Awesome. I lied. There's going to be one more question and then a final question, unless there's more audience questions. We do have until 7:30, but if we don't use all that time, that's okay. So our second to last question, I promise, I think this time, is what do you think the U.S.'s role should be in the future regarding Ukraine and like local conflicts? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So, I have a perspective on this informed by the fact that I come from a military family. My mother is Lieutenant Colonel Caldwell. My father is Colonel Caldwell. My brother, older, was in the Coast Guard. My younger just left the Air Force. A member of my family has fought in every major American war, with the exception of Afghanistan, going back to the Spanish-American War. And I happen to be born on an overseas military base. So I've seen the cost, for better and for worse, of America's global role in the world. I do not think we should hold this position forever, but I do think that for now we have a role to play as the backbone of the modern global order, and that we should serve and continue to serve as the vanguard of the Enlightenment, of small L, liberal democratic values where people are free to express themselves, free to engage in economic activity, and to chart their path in the world. I think this is a universal value. Ukraine is very important because Russia is a direct threat to that. They want what they call a multipolar world, which in reality is just them being able to bully their neighbors while China bullies their neighbors. And I guess we are left to bully South America. At least that's how Trump seems to take it. I think if we truly believe in our values, this will not always be America being, the world police. Europe needs to build up its forces. Other countries need to build up their forces. But while there is a, communist party in China and a corrupt Russia, we are going to need to be the arsenal of democracy and continue to hold the line for these timeless values.
So yeah, I mean, our role as the world police right now, seen in my lifetime, I've only seen regression in America specifically because of these wars as well, going things like Iraq or Afghanistan, things like Obama with Libya. When we go into these places, we do things like regime change. We're leaving these places mostly worse off, and we're not spreading some message of democracy or building up a country or we're just going in and making the place worse. And honestly, we had no business to be there in the first place besides our military industrial complex making money. So, I mean, I don't want to just completely, I don't want to go to a multipolar world where we just have spheres of influence and we have people like, like Russia and China doing what they want in the world, and you see how Trump wants to take over places like Venezuela and have our influence here. But I also think that we're going to have to do a lot of reforming in our country with like things like our military industrial complex and how they do things on spending things on like war, how they influence war and want to profiteer off of these things. For example, like Ukraine and Russia, that's the situation that I think is much more complicated than a lot of other ones. Because Russia's a nuclear armed country, we definitely should just appease them and give them all the land in Ukraine, especially very nice, large swaths of land. But it's also very, we're not going to go die for Ukraine or a nuclear armed country. So that's a very hard one to navigate. But definitely, what Donald Trump is doing right now was not it. What Biden was doing was not it. We definitely have to do. It's not necessarily the United States' role though as well though, but with things like what's happening in Palestine right now, us funding a genocide, we definitely should be doing things like that, things that we have control over. And some things like Ukraine and Russia, that's much harder to control. Things like what us funding Israel and give them money to kill children and mostly civilians overseas are things that we shouldn't be doing globally.
So I think foreign affairs is a very complex subject because we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach because our relationship with almost every country is different. But I do think that our approach should always be to support the stabilization of countries, because when countries are stabilized and we see less people having to leave their country and try to go into another country, we don't see as much famine in those countries. A lot of people have issues with foreign aid, but when we're sending money to ensure that those economies are stabilized, then it prevents those people from trying to leave to go somewhere else to find resources. So I would say it's not something that can be easily answered because it does depend on the country and their situation, but I do believe that we should support Ukraine. I was listening on the way over here how they're investing in drone technology, and that's how they've been able to stave off Russia for almost 5 years now. And so, looking at those investments and how can we reduce the body casualties of war and fight smarter wars and just making sure that we're stabilizing countries rather than creating more chaos around the world.
Okay, thank you. So our final question for tonight is going to be, is there anything specific that you wanted to share that you didn't get the chance to yet?
Honestly, no, I wouldn't say like anything like I just wanted to share. I'd love to answer questions, talk to anybody after this. But the same thing that I usually just say, like I'm running just because I want to see a brighter future. I want to see politicians are going to push forward the ideas that we want. We want to just say things like, we want cheaper things in life. We want more affordability or so. We're going to have to say the policies that matter, policies that help it. Like I say, going around into places and talking to rural counties and to people in rural counties, people, especially, here, talk about something like Duke Energy. We should turn that into a public good. Our politicians should be talking like that. They should be coming for corporate power and challenging it. So, realistically, I'm running just because I really want to run on that big message that we really don't need to change for. This is how politicians are going to be. God willing, hopefully going to be sounding within the next 10 to 20 years. So I really just want to get that head start and really start pushing forward these ideas forward first here.
So I think I just want to say thank you, whether you're here in person, watching online, or you watch the replay. Thank you for taking the time to get to know us and to really deliberate about who you want to vote for and who you want to lead you. I hope that this is not the end of the conversation, but this is the beginning of a conversation, and that you all feel that no matter which one of us is elected, that you have a representative that you can reach out to, you can share your concerns, and you feel confident that we're going to answer those questions and help to keep you informed so that you can go back and tell your friends who don't come to these types of events. And if there's anything that you wanted to ask and you get back to your apartment or your dorm room, you're like, man, I wish I had asked that question, you can go to my website, womack4nc14.com. I have a constituents concerns form on there, and people send me emails with questions all the time. I still answer my own emails, so shoot me a message, and if there's something that you want to know more about, or if there's just something that you want to share that you're concerned about, I want to hear from you. I don't want this to just be about me and what's important to me and my issues, but for it to really be about you and what's important for you, because I think that's what a representative should do. They should represent the people that they've been elected to serve. So thank you all again for this opportunity.
Yes, I'm honored that you all would have me here tonight. As I said at the beginning, I can't overstate how important my years of college activism were to making me the man that I am today. In that time when I felt that my LGBT friends were being attacked and persecuted, when I felt that my own mother was being taken out of her home by large forces in the Bush administration that were beyond my control, it was only in college when I started getting involved that I realized that I had agency and that through my own efforts I could improve my own life and the lives of those around me. It sparked something in me that I, created a little flame, and I've tended it ever since. Sometimes it's under threat, but I try to keep it going. And to be a little cheesy, I'll say, this little light of mine, I'm trying to let it shine out here on this campaign. And I hope to speak to all of you one-on-one, and I invite you to participate in my campaign. Our website is CaldwellForCongress2026.com. We have 3 interns right now. Soon after the primary, we will be opening up for summer internships. And if you feel that now is the time to take a stand, if you feel that action needs to be taken, then please do so through my campaign or talk to me, and I will help you find a role in the Roy Cooper campaign or others. I know of a lot of people, frankly, and I can get you a position. And perhaps you should take off next fall, because if you think the Republic is in danger, then there's nothing that you should not do to defend it, because it's our heritage and it's worth fighting for. So thank you all for the time. Please come talk to me afterwards if you have a minute. I'd love to get to know you and love to get you involved.
Okay.
Let's see if you can close the statement. Ish, or do you want to
Okay. I think we are done. Thank you all for coming coming here. And thanks so much to our audience for coming as well. If you'd like to come up and ask individual questions to the candidates, now is the time to do so. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Dylan. It's great to meet you. I will talk to you guys in a second here. We'll turn off the live stream. We had some people watching on the live stream as well. Hold on.
We got your name.